Hello, 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 everybody. Why am I not on the screen? There we go. Hello, everybody. I am Jayme CheeseSlice. I am the engineer and producer of Uncontrolled Opposition, and today we've got a good show for you. Let me go ahead and bring on our guest for the day, our host for today. It's Gloria, Guillo, and Jayme Kuzmarov. Welcome, guys, to your own show. How are you doing? For everybody watching at home, if this is your first time watching the show, this is a radio program first and foremost, and we are recording that radio show here live on YouTube and Rumble for you guys to see it totally unedited. And that way, if there's something that's cut or there's extra content that doesn't make it into the show, you can see it right here. So, Gloria, let's go ahead and bring on our guest, Andrii. How are you?
Hey, everybody.
Hi, Andrii.
We're going to start off with Gloria's monologue, and then once she's done with that, she's going to bring you onto the show, and then it's going to be yours to run away with. So everybody at home, let's get ready. Gloria, take it away.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition, where together we battle mind wars with truth strikes. I'm Gloria Guillo, an investigative journalist, and I'm here with my co-host, Professor Jayme Kuzmarov, managing editor of Covert Action magazine. Our producer and engineer is Jayme CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are ours and that of our guests, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional or legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to form their own opinions. Today, we welcome Andrii Telizhenko, a former Ukrainian diplomat and parliamentary aide, who will explain Ukraine's military intelligence operations under CIA-trained Kyrylo Budanov. Prior to being named head of the Office of the President, which is equivalent to in the U.S. to Presidential Chief of Staff, on January 2nd, 2026, Budanov was head of the main Directorate of Intelligence, called HUR, from August 5th, 2020 to 2026. Before heading HUR, Budanov directed Unit 2245. This is known as a CIA-trained special ops unit that regularly engaged in sabotage and covert actions in Crimea and Donbass. Budanov oversaw campaigns of targeted terror that were designed to crush resistance, dismantle opposing structures, and control people, territory, and resources. These included cross-border raids like the 2016 Crimea landing, where the unit, dressed up in Russian uniforms, planted explosives and then killed first responders. Nice. Car bombings, drone assassinations, bridge attacks, like the 2022 Kerch explosion, which killed civilians, and the killings of officials, collaborators, critics, and any perceived threats when they're deep inside Russia or in occupied areas. Russian authorities have charged Budanov with terrorism tied to over 100 such acts. The CIA playbook is to develop blacklists that identify targets and then use deniable proxies or special units to execute their hits. The intention is to use fear and terror to break governance, morale, and local support in contested zones. This terror campaign aims to eliminate anyone sustaining or living under the opposing side to open Ukraine's rich assets, endless grain fields, Black Sea energy routes, lithium, graphite, titanium, uranium, and other rare earth minerals critical for global tech and military industries, so that the U.S. corporate can plunder this through vulture capitalism. The U.S.-backed mineral deals already grant preferential access and revenue sharing in exchange for aid, turning reconstruction into extraction while civilians face displacement, death, and chaos. These methods echo and build upon the CIA's Phoenix program in Vietnam, which is from 1967 to 1972. This is a historical blueprint for the same kind of state terror. Phoenix blacklisted and neutralized, and they use the word neutralized. It's murder, folks. Tens of thousands of civilians, farmers, teachers, organizers through quotas, death squads, torture. And, these torture techniques are just hideous. Electric shocks, water tortures, beatings, rapes, brain prodding with dowels hammered into ears, and extrajudicial killings to terrorize populations into submission and to lock in U.S. control over resources and strategic dominance. Ukraine's operations adapt this playbook: civilian targeted strikes, psychological warfare via amped atrocities, and proxy violence to break resistance and enable exploitation. But hey, the fact that it didn't work in Vietnam is ignored. But the danger of using terrorist tactics extends beyond Vietnam or Ukraine. These foreign tested terror techniques, I'll repeat for Jayme, these foreign tested terror tactics are being turned inward against U.S. citizens who question our exploitive system. Critical works like Marshall Thomas's Monarch, the New Phoenix program, describe how Phoenix became a model for domestic suppression. Labeled as extremism or threats, questioning voices face invisible no-trace tools refined abroad, harassment driving despair, institutionalization, or silence without overt evidence. Phoenix terrorized Vietnamese to dominate. Ukraine's campaign refined the machinery, and the domestic New Phoenix risks terrorizing Americans to prevent resistance to the same plunder of lives and wealth. The dots connect starkly. Operations in Ukraine perfect colonial terror for extraction. Then the playbook returns home to crush anyone here who dares challenge the grip of global resources and power extraction. Thank you. Andrii, please introduce yourself to our audience and explain to us all what the CIA is really doing in Ukraine based on your insider knowledge and eagle-eye perspective.
Thank you, first of all, for having me on the show. Great honor and pleasure. And yes, I'm Andrii Telizhenko. I'm a former Ukrainian government official, diplomat, who exposed the DNC Ukraine Hillary Clinton collaboration during the Trump campaign 2016, went out public with it, and then testified, gave evidence to the United States Senate on Hunter Biden and his dealings in Ukraine, for which I got sanctioned in the United States. falsely and unsanctioned by the Zelensky regime in Ukraine, and put on a kill list militaries in Ukraine, for which you had to flee Ukraine because of speaking the truth and speaking about peace and ending this war before it even started. I was advisor to a member of parliament of Ukraine back in 2012, and I was advisor to the first deputy prime minister on senior policy issues in 2014. I was advisor to the prosecutor general of Ukraine in 2014-15 on international relations issues, and I was a diplomat, third secretary in the embassy of Ukraine in Washington, D.C. in 2015 and 16, which after I resigned, not willing to comply and obey the legal orders, working with the Democratic Party against presidential candidate Donald Trump at that time, which was basically illegal. And then I did political consulting and with different politicians and government officials in Ukraine and Washington, and also in Washington D.C. throughout these last years before sanctioned. Now I'm in political asylum in Switzerland, and continue to speak out the truth. What happened in Ukraine? And what happened was a lot of atrocities under the leadership of this man Budanov, who was basically the former head of the military intelligence of Ukraine. Went into fight a civil war in Donbass in 2014, and then basically started doing what he did during the time, not fighting a war, even a civil war, but fighting regular people, going and targeting regular people who lived in the Donbass area, people, children, women, men, and his battalion used to take over houses and just basically torture the people within, and then leave the house with what they could get, and then sell it on the black market or sell it to government officials or politicians or anybody who they can find. And that's what got the interest of the U.S. government. People like that, scum of the earth, which would then be taken in by the wing of the United States and said, "Oh, look, you want to work for us?" And he did, and he sold his soul. I also had such approaches to my persona for the years I worked in the Ukrainian government, but I denied all of them, and that's why I'm in my situation. That's why Budanov, not being even the age of 45, being a general of an army in Ukraine, and now being the chief of staff of the illegal president in Ukraine. So this is the beginning. I can answer any questions that you have. Any additional thing I can add, I will.
Great. Yeah. Well, that's really important insight, and our media has not been reporting this conflict properly at all, and as a result of that, even the peace groups have been silent. They've focused all their protest on the Middle East and Israelis, which is fine. I mean, we know the Israelis have done a lot of terrible things, but what's gone on in Ukraine is a horror show as well. Another Vietnam type affair with these Phoenix programs, as Gloria is pointing out, and there should be wide-scale protests, and there's not. Maybe you can start by just explaining what happened with the Maidan coup and how that all went down, and how that triggered this conflict, and how the U.S. was responsible, and then maybe you can go more into the CIA. But first start, I think, with the Maidan coup and give us some insights.
Yeah, the Maidan, I was part of it, not just as a protester, but I was advisor on, and not just advisor, but coordinator for unofficial work with the U.S. government and G7 embassies during that period of time. I just came back from the United States where I studied and was hired to be an advisor member of parliament, which was also on Maidan, but his role was to sit in a tent, give us money to feed the people. But my role was to coordinate the work with the leaders of the opposition of the time, Ukraine, with the United States government, U.S. embassy on the ground, and G7 embassies, providing security for people who were on Maidan, like visas with EU and that kind of stuff. So I know stuff from within directly. Senator McCain came to Kiev. It was my initiative and my coordination that him and Chris Murphy were on the ground on Maidan, and Newland cookies. It was we had that meeting in the Hyatt in late of December. Remember that time where I was called in by.
Did you get one of Newland's cookies?
I was the one who advised her to get the cookies because she wanted to give out bread. She wanted to tear bread and give out like Jesus the bread to the people because she really wanted to show her face that she's responsible for this, that she's the one who's basically managing and coordinating this whole work. And we basically said it's very gonna look be a bad picture. It's pretty dirty outside. People are there for a couple of weeks already, and it's not a good picture. If you go out, bread is going to be like the Roman times. Like let's be more sanitized in the situation. And as the cookie idea came out, packed cookies in a bag. That's where I advised her, and then they picked up the idea. So
yeah. It was your idea for the cookies, huh? Wow.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. I was doing my job at that time, and what I saw was full coordination with the U.S. Embassy. Any action, taking aggressive or big actions on Maidan, the taking over of the buildings, the governmental buildings, attacking the police, or pushing against opposition or government officials at that time, the presidential administration of Yanukovych, was all done with the full coordination of the U.S. Embassy on the ground. Even take off a monument, the Lenin Monument, which was torn down in Kiev at the time by the radical neo-Nazis, so the Svoboda Party, was done again without the coordination of the U.S. Embassy. They were pissed about it, and basically the ambassador Pyatt had to come in and basically move Svoboda aside for a couple of days to calm them down. So it was all done on full hand, one-on-one work with the leaders of the opposition and the U.S. government officials and the CIA, and the money. There was cash coming in with the diplomatic cars. I was responsible also for overseeing that process when the cars would come in the back doors of the trade union building where the protester or his organization club, so-called club, was, and they would come in and put them on the second floor, and there was a huge room full just stacked with cash. There was, I don't know how much money there was, but there was a lot, and then cash was used to give away to people, to protesters, to buy food, to buy fuel, etc. I got paid personally around $40,000 for the protest work I did during the Maidan three-month period of time.
And can you explain how that triggered the much wider war in Ukraine?
Before that, could you just like a point of clarification? Just you were getting paid by the United States government to coordinate protests against the Ukrainian government.
Not directly. I was paid through the organizers who received the funds through so-called grants. Like, for example, there was the Euromaidan, which then basically was doing its work to protest, and the leaders of Euromaidan got paid through grants for their protest work, for coordination, and for that money, I got paid directly for doing coordinating what I did. So basically, it wasn't direct payment. Nobody paid you directly. Like no U.S. diplomat would sit down. The money would be on Maidan, and people responsible, like the leaders of the protest movement, were responsible for that money. And there depends on which section you were in. You would get paid. There was the radical section of preparing the weapons and the cocktail Molotovs on Maidan. They were radical. They would get paid by different people. There was the Maidan protesters on cars. They would get paid by one side of the people. They would be the international part of Maidan and get paid by one side of the people, because I did work on both sides a little bit. So I got paid from both of the leaders of those works. So that's what was happening. But the cash was coming in from diplomatic cars. All the coordination was coming in from the U.S. Embassy. Ambassador Pyatt personally used to come in and inspect how the cocktail Molotovs were prepared to hit and go against the police force, which was doing their job on the streets. So this is basically, it was a directed coup against an acting president, worked and pushed through, not just by some covert group or conspiracy group, directly pushed by the government of the United States, the U.S. Embassy, which represents itself, not even hiding. I was in full contact directly with Ambassador Pyatt through my cell phone. if we were being attacked by the police, I would call him, and somebody from the U.S. government would call the president of Ukraine to put fear in him, political fear, so they would stop the act of the police, and then the protesters would advance and take over some other buildings. So this was directly managed, from the ground, but it was also protected in a way that nobody would say, "Oh, I got paid directly by the U.S. Embassy." But I was told by the U.S. Embassy, by people who were working there, and people like Liz Zentis and the military attaché there, that if I ever was in trouble, I would be evacuated by the U.S. government out of Ukraine if something happened during that protest.
Well, I just wanted,
the CIA
hold on, just
present, also handing out money.
It was the money from the U.S. government, like U.S. diplomatic plates, Suburbans and minivans would come in, would basically directly putting that money on Maidan in the trade union building where the organizers of the Maidan were set, and then that money would be given away by the coordinators of Maidan directly.
on our last show, we were discussing the human rights industry and how corrupt that is. And, one of the things that you're describing is just the way this money is passed through different organizations. So it's kind of cleansed. There's like a little bit of a removal, and we've talked a lot in our show, especially Jeremy, about NED and USAID and how these organizations pass through funds. And I just wanted to highlight that because right now we have an operation like this going on in Iran. And we have the left, believing that these protests, which sound just like what went on in Ukraine, are organic. And what you're explaining is they're not organic, and they weren't organic in Ukraine. They were funded by the U.S. government, and they were coordinated by the CIA. And money, tremendous amounts of money, were flowing to accomplish these violent objectives to destroy the existing government.
Yes, that's directly what it is. Basically, you have coordinated organizers who then gather the people, and the people calm down. They'll have erupt another event, a killing of a person, an activist, and again the people would erupt in more action, and they would use that situation to go after the government, undermine the police, make the police force and law enforcement less powerful, and then take over it, and then advance against the higher government officials and the president himself. So those actions are basically by the book what's being done right now in the United States, what was done in Ukraine, but now it's on U.S. soil directly against the U.S. government itself. That is the biggest problem. This is the deep state what is doing it, and the same thing was done by the deep state in Ukraine directly, and the CIA. They were pushing through this narrative and idea, and unfortunately, I was also offered after the Maidan even grant money, which after that I didn't take because I was getting to realize what was happening really with my work and overseeing law enforcement and intel agencies in Ukraine and doing my government work. I started to see what was the truth and how it was being done directly. So that was when I changed my mind. But Ukraine itself, this thing was used, what Jeremy was asking directly, is to undermine president of Ukraine, who was not, he was pro-Russian, but he was also pro-Western. He was trying to play the game in the middle between the EU and Russia because Ukraine was trying to sign an agreement with the EU to join the economical union there, and Russia had its own economical approaches in Ukraine and opportunities that Ukraine had more involved. And basically he said, look, I'm going to wait for the moving Ukraine to EU. Let's see what Russia can offer, put on the table, and what EU can offer more, maybe something better for us. And that's when it erupted. So basically it changed Ukraine's move towards alliances with Russia and basically tear it apart, and then use this situation to have Russia come in and start protecting its military base in Crimea, which basically any country would do that. The United States would do the same thing if they had a military base in a region where they historically would be placed there. They would come in and basically protect it. That's what Russia did. Plus, historically, Ukraine was part of Russia for more than 350 years, and that's what Russia did. They protected Crimea, and after that, the United States used this agenda that something was taken from the Ukrainians by the Russians, start a civil war in Donbass, the hatred towards the people, because Ukrainians put their pride up, basically rose them to a Nazi level that Ukrainians are much higher than Russians, that you can kill Russians, it's okay to kill Russians, and start a civil war, which now led to a huge conflict involving almost World War III scenario, where the West using Ukraine to fight Russia, and Russia's fighting the West on Ukrainian territory. And unfortunately, that's what's happening in Ukraine today, and that's what was Ukrainians were used, and the Ukrainian politicians sold out for U.S. passports, for U.S. money, getting paid millions of dollars after that. Some were giving just passports and just selling off the country to have this track happening, because they didn't care. They understand they're going to leave. Zelensky understands he's going to leave. And there is not also the United States involved in this, but also the Great Britain, MI6, which Zelensky basically is owned by MI6 at one point, together with Yermak. They're citizens of the UK. The Crown agents, the similarity of the USAID, came into Ukraine at one point in 2000, I believe 18. They were coming more aggressively into Ukrainian political sphere and pushing their agenda in and financing politicians. So basically, it was divided between Western influences, and this is how Ukraine is run today. Not sovereign, somebody controls it.
Great, yeah, a number of questions, and hopefully, we can get to covering the current intrigues, and the power struggle going on with Zelensky, and how he's vulnerable now. But first, if you can just articulate, because many people still see this as a war, even on the left, a war of Russian aggression. But I think the narrative you're helping to people can understand is that the Ukrainian army, after this U.S. and UK manufactured coup d'état, the Ukrainian army started attacking the people of Eastern Ukraine and brutalizing them, and that those people actually looked on the Russians as their defenders from these neo-Nazis. So maybe you can say something about that, and then go into the CIA's role after the Maidan coup.
Well, what happened is the people in Eastern Ukraine, which spoke Russian all their life, like in Ukraine, 99% of the people speak and understand Russian. 70%, 60% speak and understand Ukrainian. So that's the reality. So, and especially in Eastern Ukraine, the Russian-speaking population, they wanted, like, they're closer to Russia. They wanted to be closer to Russia. That's their historical part. They said, we don't want to be involved with this neo-Nazi government. We want to be independent, or even before saying we want to be independent, look, don't take away our Russian-speaking rights. We want to speak the language which we were born. But Ukraine said no, because the radical regime with the neo-Nazis, the Svoboda Party, which is totally neo-Nazi, forming neo-Nazi battalions already at that time, the Azov battalion, the right sector, said no, everybody has to speak Ukrainian. This is the Ukrainization. It was not even the politicians speaking. It was all these orders given from the outside. I remember there was a meeting when the civil war in Donbass started to break out, when people started to uprising there. The director of CIA Brennan came to Ukraine. I gave this interview to Aaron Mate 2 years ago. He wrote an article on Ukraine and on my information. And one of the information I gave him was the meeting with director of CIA Brennan, which I was part in. He said directly, when the people of Donbass uprose, you have to shell them. You have to shell them. And it was the director of CIA who gave that order to the acting president, Turchinov, at that time, since this was in April of 2014. And 3 days later, the anti-terrorist operation was officially announced. And that's when the Ukrainian army, military, Air Force, which Ukraine had at that time, tanks, started to shell regular people, the regular people who just rose and went on the streets, the same thing, the way people did in Maidan in Kiev, but without any CIA support, just said we want to protest against this, were shelled by military aircraft just for speaking out. So this is what Ukraine did. And at that time, Russia said, look, we're going to assist in this. Let's stop this. And they basically, at one point, it gave military advisors into that region and started politically push against the Kiev regime to stop them from shelling the people of Donbass and start negotiations to bring that area back as an autonomy for Ukraine. Russia didn't want that territory. Said, look, take it away as an autonomy, but we Russia will guarantee the people's rights in Lugansk, Donetsk region. So that's the reality. That's the move of this. Ukraine said, yes, we will negotiate. They negotiate for 8 years, basically lied with those negotiations. Poroshenko, the former president of Ukraine, came out, and Chancellor Angela Merkel and President Hollande publicly said, oh, yes, we used those 8 years of negotiations with Russia on the Donbass to strengthen the Ukrainian army so they could move and advance into Russia later on. So this is what we're bringing up today. It was a civil war when the Ukrainian army attacked the people. Nobody covered it. Nobody mentioned it. It was basically run and coordinated directly from outside Ukraine. I was present during that meeting. There were other meetings where White House officials, the Vice President Biden, that come in and tell the Ukrainian president what to do, how to attack, and what not to negotiate with Russia on the peace deals on Donbass. Even though Ukraine could have got its territory with the people back without any civil war, without today's war, which Ukraine lost more than 2 million lives, as an autonomy and having their rights as Russian-speaking population, and that'd be over. Nothing of this, no struggles, no taking back of Donbass military-wise would be the case for Zelensky or anybody else. But no, it went sideways, especially when Zelensky came to power, because he came on the power on the basis of peace. He said, we're going to bring peace to Ukraine. We will solve the issue of Donbass. We'll bring back the people of Donbass to Ukraine. And I'm Russian-speaking. Everybody, they're Russian-speaking. There should be no problem. People believed him. That's what they voted 72% for him. But then a month later, after he became president, he was taken to London, where he sold out to the MI6. He was taken to London by oligarch Viktor Pinchuk, basically brought him to the head of the MI6, which promised Zelensky that he's going to become a billionaire, a world leader, and very powerful, and that they're going to give him, basically, he got British citizenship for his family and for his close surrounding, and that's what basically he sold out for money. But you're going to fight a war, that's what he said. And Zelensky knew that he's going to fight this war before it even started. So this is what Ukraine is today, and controlled, coordinated by different intel groups from around the globe without any voice of its own. And the people are the ones who are struggling and suffering. And Russia is protecting its national security interest after it was lied to for numerous times, especially after the last biggest lie was the Istanbul negotiations of 2022, when Ukraine agreed upon signing a peace deal. And then Prime Minister of the UK, Boris Johnson, told him, no, you cannot sign any more deals. Back away, even though when Russia took away its army from Kiev, you should back away and then advance in Russia. You will win. That's what they're also advising Zelensky today, that he's going to win.
Well, one thing I just want to add, and I hope Jeremy jumps in here, is the CIA has a habit, and not just the CIA, but the intelligence for MI6, all of the above, of they use someone and then they kill them. So, they can promise you the moon, and then all of a sudden it's, you're a Noriega, dead, tortured and dead. You're a Saddam Hussein, tortured and dead, or you're a DM, right? Right, Jeremy?
That's true. I mean, if they're lucky, they'll get a nice retirement home somewhere, or a position at a university, or, it depends. But in some cases, yeah, when they've lost their usefulness, they'll discard them. So, I mean, yeah, that begs the question, what's happening today? Because, I mean, Ukraine has suffered tremendously in this conflict. As you said, about 2 million Ukrainian killed, a lot fled the country. The economy is in ruins. I mean, surely the population now hates Zelensky. So how much longer, in your assessment, can he stay in power, and what kind of intrigues are going on and plotting against him?
Yeah, first of all, there's more than 2 million dead. 8 million fled to Europe, and around 8 million to 9 million fled to Russia. That's the reality. People went to Russia because they. This is a great example to show that this war is not against Russia, Ukraine. It's more bigger than that. When I can add to what's happening today, what I also personally saw when I came back from the States in Ukraine, all these top-level politicians, all these oligarchs, billions of dollars they have in their pockets, and they were asking me, how can I sell out to the CIA? They wanted to be all agents. They watched too many James Bond movies. I'm serious. It's not just because we're talking about the CIA. They actually were coming to me and say they believe that I worked for the CIA because I came from the United States. Sergei Leshchenko, the advisor to Zelensky today, and the Soros guy in Kiev, actually believed that I was a CIA guy because the U.S. Embassy treated me as one of their own, and I spoke perfect English, etc. And I was in Ukraine doing all these things. So this is how they were ready to sell out their country. They're not just corruptionaires; they're collaborators of a foreign government. And this is the elites of Ukraine today. This is the reality, and this is what Trump, today's administration, Washington needs to understand. They're not working, and they're going to work for their country. These people are working against their country. They're going to work for anybody else that offers them something bigger in return, and they believe that they're going to be settled, as I said, in a house somewhere with their money, teaching at a university. That's what they want. But I think Zelensky's role is done, and his days are numbered. The people today, his ratings are so low. I speak not just to the people and to the government officials. I still have contacts there. I also speak to people from the military who reach out to me. The military knows Ukraine is done. The military who's fighting on the front lines, their average lifespan, who's on the hot spots, is 4 hours of the Ukrainian military. That's the reality. 4 hours for them. They cannot live longer because there's no professionals there. The professionals that were there at the beginning, that were trained by NATO and the CIA for 8 years, Russia basically destroyed all of them within the first year and a half. Everybody who's on TV right now talking, they're just populists and being used within the propaganda machine. That's it. They never fought wars or they never went to the front lines, even though they're wearing camouflages and saying, "Oh, we're soldiers and we're fighting." So there's a huge propaganda system working in Ukraine. Ukraine is not democratic. Men cannot leave the country within Ukraine. Men are being dragged like dogs from the streets to be fighting to the front lines. They're beekeepers, plumbers, farmers, IT guys who go on the street to get groceries, then they're taken by the police, and then 5 hours later they're in a boot camp, and 2 days later they're right in a hot spot. So this is, people are understanding that they're losing all this. No money's being paid out for the dead ones because there's no money in Ukraine. Ukraine is being financed from outside, and the finances are going down every day. And Europe cannot sustain this war. So Zelensky is doing very, very bad. That's why there's an interest to change him. And the interest to change him is coming from the UK right now, because the UK was the one who bought him. UK is the one who pushed him to this war. And UK actually wanted to change a figure that's going to be a legitimate president, because Zelensky is not legitimate by Article 110 of the Constitution of Ukraine itself. And plus, the popularity is done because the people are freezing to death. There's the temperatures are minus 30 degrees Celsius right now in Kiev. Everything is freezing. The plumbing is going down. There's nobody taking care of it because all the men were sent to the front lines who could have taken care of all these problems within the community and the mayor's offices around the country. So it's all being destroyed. I apologize for my language. Even things from the bathroom are coming out. All the biological stuff are coming out and freezing people's houses. So this is what people cannot live like this. People are afraid for their loved ones to come out on the street because they're going to get kidnapped by the government and sent, and nobody's going to know where they are. They're being taken. Men with their children are being left on the street to cry, and men are being sent to the front lines. This is the reality. This is Ukraine.
The thing I heard recently is that they're going up to over 60 for conscription. Is that true?
Yes, that's what they offered, to go over 60. And they also offered, as of yesterday, they want to push a law that anybody who is a permanent resident, not a citizen, but a permanent resident of Ukraine, holding a different passport of a different other country, United States, whatever, will have to be conscripted forcefully to the front line to fight if they want to keep that permanent residency, because that's what they want to do. This is what's being talked about right now. So any foreigner that want to go to Ukraine and observe the so-called democracy there, think they're going to be happy, safe in a cafe. No, you're going to be taken to the front line if you have residency in Ukraine or have a business, anything else. That's what's being prepared for you. So this is the so-called democracy they're going for. So I was talking about Zelensky's popularity in the MI6. They want to change him for Zelensky, for example. This is one of the guys He's being backed up by some of the politicians in Ukraine. He's being backed up by some of the people within the military intelligence of Ukraine. That's why Zelensky hired Budanov to protect him from his own, within his own military intelligence, so they will not do uprising against Zelensky, because everybody knows it's lost. And plus, the British want to show a face to the world that there's a new leader in Ukraine. But to continue this war, to then hold until the midterms in the United States, push this idea of the so-called negotiations of peace not leading anywhere, into the midterms, make Trump look like a fool, and then have the Democratic Party overtake the Congress and Senate, and then go back and start funding this war again and pushing more funds. And this is what they want, and then change the face in Kiev and have Zelensky run the show again. The guy who was the chief of military staff of the whole army the first 2 years of the war, under his leadership, more than 1 million Ukrainian soldiers died. Then he fled basically as an ambassador to his position as ambassador to London, where he was protected by the MI6. And now they want to take him back when Zelensky is being done over with, and replace him with this guy to continue this war and continue this process of destroying more Ukrainians and trying to funnel more money through Ukraine. Ukraine is a funnel machine right now.
Well, one thing I hear, and I'm not sure if this is accurate or not, but it's out on the street, is that there's a lot of organ trafficking going on with people who are sent to the front lines. I mean, you're killed, and if you're killed in 4 hours, they've got your kidneys and liver in 4 hours, and basically these organs are heading to Israel and other places where they are sold. And that so in some ways, this war is not just in killing people, but in harvesting their organs. So folks, if you think you're going to Ukraine to, liberate, the only thing they're going to liberate is your liver. Is that true?
Yeah. So, there was a law passed a couple of months before the conflict started. What a coincidence. A couple of months before the conflict, that there's made it legal for organ transportation. So this is what's happening. And the former Minister of Defense, Reznikov, he was responsible for pushing and lobbying that law in Ukrainian parliament, and he was responsible for harvesting organs for the last 10 years in Ukraine, even illegally. And when he became the Minister of Defense during his leadership, there was a lot of that going on in Ukraine. The black market was just thriving, and it's still thriving today, but it's went a little bit underground, but it's still there. Basically, the soldiers are coming back. Well, the relatives are sometimes not getting the full bodies. They're just getting like a piece of a body, and that's it, like a piece of a spine, and everything else is gone. There's nothing there. So you cannot even directly say what happened. Oh, it was the Russians who killed them, and that's it. So this is what's not just even organ harvesting, but also kidnapping of children. Children are being basically taken out of the country to the Balkans, and they're to Spain, and then all over the globe for sex trafficking. This is also what's happening, and also to Turkey and other places. So this is what Ukraine is today. Deadpool, a destruction zone, which I begged not for this to happen, telling people on TV before it ever happened, that like basically I said that I knew that this was going somewhere bad around 2015, 2016. And that's why I went out of government office. I came out publicly condemning the president of Ukraine for working for the foreigners and the foreign elites. And since then, I was having a lot of troubles with my life since 2016 and 17. But even then, I continued. And unfortunately, nobody listened. And neither was just me. There was a lot of other people talking about this. And today, what we're seeing is fully controlled Ukraine, not sovereign. This war should never have started. It would never started if the United States, the CIA would never meddled in Ukraine, the backyard of Russia. What would happen if China or Russia would meddle in Canada or Mexico? I think we would see a really fast strike back from the United States to those territories, or taking over those territories right away, or changing the governments there, etc. So this is done on Russia's back territory. Ukraine was part of Russia historically for more than 350 years constitutionally, and before that, it was all came at birth from Kiev, the Russians, the Russian state, and Ukraine altogether. Like all this part was basically a birth from Kiev itself, and it was always called. This land was called Russian since the beginning of times when it was founded more than 1,000 years ago. And so you don't meddle. You don't go destroy churches. What's happening right now? Christian Orthodox churches my churches are being destroyed in Ukraine today by Zelensky, by his regime, from coordination from outside of Ukraine. It's all being done by Pompeo, for example. He was the one who was responsible for forming this new OCE church, which is now basically the government church of Ukraine, which is a fake church formed by the CIA and the State Department, starting from Hillary Clinton and Pompeo, basically implemented that idea.
And can you actually, yeah, that was a question I wanted to ask. Was twofold to elaborate on what you're saying. Also, with regard to the sham democracy, how there are a lot of the political prisoners, the banning of parties, and the murder. I read about the murder of Ilya Kiva, who was the head of the Socialist Party in Ukraine's parliament. He was murdered, and Ukraine took credit for that. And the Marotveret's website, which you may be on, if you could say something about all that. And also, yeah, the religious persecution. Are they actually physically destroying the churches and arresting people who belong to the Russian Orthodox Church? Is that what's going on? So those are my two questions.
Yeah, I'll continue with the churches and then go back to the churches. They're basically taking over the churches, having the police, the radical forces, the neo-Nazi forces, with some helpers, which were funded by the NDI, NED, USAID for all these years, coming in, basically throwing out the priests, the clergymen out of them, taking the clergymen then to prison if they protest too much with the people who actually support the church. And then they basically rob the church from what it has, the icons, which cost a lot of money, the Bibles, which are gold-plated, like everything, and they rob it, and then they implement that church to the OCE church, the new formed state church of Ukraine, and that is it. And then people don't go there. Like one or two people who start going there. There's not that community doesn't go to the church anymore because it's not their church. It's some fake organized church which Poroshenko paid $50 million even to push this idea with the Constantinople Patriarch. So this is all a big sham and fake history and fake developments, fake politics. What's happening? The other clergymen they're taking us into prison. They took over the holy church, the biggest church, the cathedral in Ukraine, the Lavra, which there's a couple of them in the world, and one of them is in Kiev. And it's one of the oldest. Its history goes back to over, as I said, 900 years, where the Orthodoxy within the Rus, the Russian state, and the Russian land was forming, and they took over that, and they started having rock concerts in that church, rock concerts, potato peeling concerts, culinary shows, you name it, and also the neo-Nazis started to gather there for their conferences, putting neo-Nazi symbols within the church itself. That's what they did to the holiest place of the Christian Orthodox in Ukraine. So this is what is happening, like as a great example. And it also that the priests, the clergymen are under house arrest or in prisons, and they will not speak out. A lot of them are being pressured by the security service of Ukraine, and they're political prisoners in Ukraine. More than 20,000 of them. The United Nations writes reports on this, and they actually confirm there's around 20,000 political prisoners within the so-called democratic state of Ukraine. This is what democracy is. This is where your all money, somebody's funding. If you want to fund Ukraine, this is where your money's going to go, to put people into prison. Gonzalo Lira, also an example, an American citizen, was tortured to death in Kharkiv by the security service of Ukraine, by the order of the President Zelensky, knowing that he's a U.S. citizen. And the U.S. government didn't do anything about it because he was criticizing Zelensky. And other people who spoke out. I was going out before the war started on opposition channels, TV channels, which were closed down by the government. Then the opposition was prosecuted, persecuted, any political party which wanted peace with Russia was closed down, even though this is historical, that it's historical that you could have a party which wants to be close with Russia or Belarus or somebody else, because we were part of that country for hundreds of years. We're close to the country. We're neighbors of that country. There's no problem with that. There's a problem. Why do we have a pro-American party in the parliament that wants to be close to America, which is 10,000 kilometers away? There's no problem to be close with America, to be friends with America. I love the United States. I grew up there. And I have no issues with the United States. We should be friends, but we should not meddle in our business. We should not go into our backyard and do stuff that you did because you can. And as I said, Ukraine today is not democratic. It's killing its people. I was almost got shot. My information was put online and on TV. When I was in Ukraine, the first 2 weeks of the conflict, I was still in Ukraine, and my information was put online. One of my friends got captured by the security service of Ukraine, and I was almost got shot because I was told I'm going to get hanged because of my position of being peace with Russia. And so I had to flee the country with my family, got political asylum in Europe and Switzerland, and this is where I am today. But a lot of people who also fled, a lot of people who couldn't flee, they got arrested. They're still in prison. They got life sentences. People who didn't just spoke out for peace, killers who are killing people right now on the streets of Kyiv, the military guys are shooting the police officers and everybody else, they're getting 15, 10 years. But people who spoke out for peace are getting life sentences in Ukraine. This is democracy. Nobody's talking about it at all. I wrote to a lot of human rights organizations. I had no response from any of them. None of them responded. I wrote to 12 or 15. None of them responded. And they go after people. Yeah, they kill opponents. They think as opponents in Ukraine, like Daria Dugina, who got blown up in the car with a terrorist attack in Moscow. Ilya Kiva, who got shot in his face by a hired killer in Russia, or other people who around Russia. A trophy was sent to somebody in a conference in St. Petersburg and got blown up. Ukraine is not just a neo-Nazi government and a non-democratic state with an illegal president. Ukraine is a terrorist state, basically run how they did Al-Qaeda and ISIS one time, and this is what Ukraine is today. That's how they're running the show, because they cannot win Russia, so they want to terrorize Russia. Why not? That's how they satisfied themselves. That's how Budanov, he agreed to satisfy the United States for doing these atrocities, because a sane person would be afraid to at least do that, because at least if you believe in God, you're going to be afraid to do these kind of things. If you want to fight, go on the battlefield and fight face to face, be a man. But sitting down behind a desk, pushing a button to kill a civilian, that's a terrorist act. And these people should be facing court one time, hopefully when this ends.
I think the most tragic part is that the American public believes the press that the American press gives them, and really doesn't have a chance to hear the stories from you and others who have come forward to basically explain what is really going on there. So I'm really hoping that our listeners, start questioning these narratives, and especially narratives in other countries. As I said a little earlier, we have Iran going on, and people actually believe that this is an organic civil war, and they're rooting for the protesters who are not protesters; they're thugs. And that's basically what has happened in Ukraine, and we've seen this in other countries too, and it might be happening in the United States with these ICE conflicts. Go ahead, Jayme.
And these so-called color revolutions, they seem innocuous, and they're presented as a feel-good moment to support these students and pro-democracy. But look what we've heard the last 45 minutes about the horror show, the deadly consequences. These are real deadly consequences, that millions of lives have been destroyed, and at the very fabric of a country. And the numbers he's given, I didn't realize those numbers are staggering. 2 million deaths, and the organ harvesting, and these attacks on civilians and politicians, and the attacks on churches and clergymen. And this is, a real horror. And, we
And the
can probably
sex
do a similar
trafficking of
program
children.
on Libya, Syria. If you look at other countries where the NED and these color revolutions occurred, like Syria, Libya, those countries have also been devastated, and that there are terrible human stories that could be told in those stories in those countries as well. Syria is in a dark age now with Al Qaeda. We're basically running the country as a consequence of this color revolution. And yet all these, not just the mainstream, but alternative media network, were celebrating these great pro-democracy uprisings. And if you're to look back at the coverage of the Maidan on networks we can't name, I'm sure they were celebrating. I know for a fact they were celebrating these brave students. Yeah, for those living in the United States, we have to listen to what Andrii is telling us, and we can't be complicit in this horror show. And his point about the human rights agencies, yeah, we had the Alfred Zayas last week spoke about the corruption of the human right, the politicization of the human rights industry, and how they're so selective. And they kind of shape the media narrative, because a lot of the major media networks rely on Human Rights Watch, which is a Soros-funded, or Amnesty International, which was founded by a British intelligence agent, and that's where they base their stories around. And as we see, they're very, very selective and politicized, and they only publicize human rights abuse when it's served U.S. geopolitical interests, when it's a government the U.S. is targeting for regime change, and not when the U.S. is itself complicit, or UK. So these are, I think, important lessons for people to understand. If we want to build a effective peace movement in the United States, we need people who are well informed and understand the manipulation that's going on of the American public, and the layers of corruption and how it extends to human rights groups.
What I could add is a lot of manipulation. During Maidan, they would make up stories of somebody would get kidnapped, and then he would be found. I know how that happened, because I was involved in some of those stories. I can testify on those kind of stuff, that what the U.S. government was backing up, and then the media were pushing. And the stories were pushed by the U.S. Embassy to the Wall Street Journal, actually ate it up and published that story as a real one. I went up public to one of the journalists that published that story just recently, and said that was a fake story. I apologize that I had to feed that to you, because of the U.S. Embassy did that through me, and he did not know that, actually. He was shocked. So this is how they use the situation. This is how they use the situation in the United States even today. So unfortunately, everybody has to look into deeper about what's happening, than just large media following this. The large media used to talk about me positively before I came out against them, or against the deep state. Then they went to me after me as a Russian agent. So look deeper, think deeper. Don't believe what you're being told, and don't follow what's happening right now in America, because this is a total color revolution scenario by the book, to try to undermine the government in the United States and the law enforcement in America.
Yeah, go ahead, Gloria. I was going to ask if we have a few minutes to go into the Hunter Biden, but go ahead, Gloria, if you had something else.
We've got to wrap it up, and we're at I think 12:02. So I would just like to give Andrii an opportunity to please to tell our audience how they can follow your work. How can they?
I'm on Facebook with Andrii Telizhenko, Andrii Telizhenko on Facebook, and also on X, Telizhenko Andy. That's my name you can follow. And also I'm on Telegram. On Telegram, I write mostly in Russian for the Russian-speaking population. So I'm almost everywhere you can be found, where I can be. Sometimes they close my page, but I'm there to be followed. And the Hunter Biden story, that's a separate thing I can talk about openly, or if you have time, I can answer any questions you have. So that's a lot of stuff we can follow.
Yeah.
Well, we have to wrap up the show for WBAI, but we can continue a little bit longer on YouTube and Rumble. So I'm just going to put on our disclosure and our outro, and the opinions you hear are ours and that of our guest, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. It wraps up our show for today. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov. Remember to like and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Please find us on Substack, Twitter X, and Podbeam. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. Okay, now, whoops, let me save this.
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
so we still have a little
minutes,
time. We're on
we have about
YouTube,
5
Rumble,
minutes.
and X at this moment, but we're not recording now for WBAI. So please finish your thoughts.
Yeah,
And Jayme had some questions too.
Yeah, well, we could have him back, to do more stuff about domestic politics in the United States and the Hunter Biden story, because probably that would be a 30-minute conversation. So
There's a lot to cover, but I can tell you that what the laptop, everything else, it's true. It's not disinformation. I think everybody now knows that. But I personally worked with a company called Blue Star Strategies, which lobbied and was the middleman, the go-to-go guy, basically between Joe Biden, the vice president, Burisma, and Hunter Biden. They hired that firm to do officially PR, but then unofficially to oversee Hunter Biden's work and basically advise him on stuff that he has to do. And Blue Star Strategies is a firm run by two former Bill Clinton advisors, Karen Tramontano and Sally Painter. So they are the heart of the deep state.
Could you spell that for us?
Blue Star Strategies.
Blue Star Strategy. Okay, thank you.
Yes, there was a report published by Senator Ron Johnson and Chuck Grassley in September of 2020, Homeland Security Committee and the Finance Committee, Hunter Biden and corruption. It was basically, it's hard to find it on Google, even though it's official Senate report. And there's a lot of information that I provided to the Senate, which is officially used there as evidence. My email and communication with Blue Star Strategies and other personas of that matter. And basically it shows how Hunter Biden was involved in the corruption in Ukraine. And that's a great piece to read. And as I said, I saw it personally, I oversaw it personally, and I was shocked what basically I did during that time when seeing how they laundered the money, how they had lobbied the banks that laundered the money through the Baltics, Latvian banks. ABLV Bank in Latvia was one of them, to funnel the money to Hunter Biden's accounts. And that was it's a small piece. As I said, there's a lot to discuss and I can talk about next time, but this is something that people have to understand, that everything that you're being fed by the big media, that something is saying lies or somebody's a Russian agent, you have to ask the question, why are they taking so much effort to go against some regular guy or somebody who spoke out if it's a lie? If it's a lie, people will not focus on it. Nobody will just cover it. But they're doing that because they want to destroy somebody's life, so it won't be covered, or basically toxify you so it will be read, or nobody will listen to this person. So do a lot more thinking before you start investigating what's really happening in America, especially.
Great. Well,
Thank
we really
you.
appreciate you coming on, and this is very insightful. And I'm going to be teaching a course starting this week on the new Cold War, and we have about 6 weeks on Ukraine. So I'm going to the Ukraine conflict. So I'm going to be showing the students this video as part of our course. So I think we could learn a lot from how this conflict started and its terrible human cost from you. So I want to thank you, very much for joining us. And
Thank you.
Thank you for having me on the show, Jayme and Gloria. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and we'll be in touch. We may have you back again. So
I would love to be back. It's a great pleasure to talk to you guys.
Yeah, and good luck with everything. Yeah, we appreciate your efforts to get the truth out, and we know you paid a human a price for that, but it'll be worth it in the end because people need to know what's really going on.
And I would have done it again because thank God I'm not with those people who have bloods on their hands.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
are involved with money. So this is what I thank God for leaving me that path. So
exactly. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, and enjoy the rest of the evening for you. Yeah.
All the best.
Usually Jayme comes back on. There he is.
Oh, there he is.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Jayme.
Well, it was such a good conversation. I didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
thanks, Andrii.
Really fantastic.
Too, but that was really good. Yeah, I'm going to use it because I'm doing a course. It starts tonight, actually, and we have 6 weeks focused on the Ukraine conflict. So I think this is perfect as a understanding for students. So
And he's a great guest because he's got all that insight from the
Oh, yeah.
inside. And I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen several of his interviews before, and he's
okay.
he's
Yeah.
so insightful.
Yeah.
It's just
He's a good
he kind
guy.
of wraps everything up to makes a lot of things make sense, especially the part about
Yeah.
the British involvement and like the co-opting of Zelensky.
Yeah.
I just think they're going to DM, you know, Zelensky.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, one of the things that I
Oh, I
think
gotta
is,
go because I've got.
yeah,
I'm gonna
okay.
put it up on the Substack now.
All right.
You guys.
Well, let's go ahead and wrap it up then.
Thank you.
You all for
And Gloria, we
watching.
can discuss the guest another time. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get that taken care of. But thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Gloria. It was a good show.
Thanks, Jayme.
Thank you for watching
Jamie.
this. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. It is a presentation of Pasta to Go for our executive producer, Craig Poster Jardula. So thanks to everybody. Have a good weekend. We'll be back next week with another episode. See ya.